Jesus once said, "In this world you will face trouble." Suffering comes to find all of us. The loss of a loved one, a cancer diagnosis, the breakdown of a relationship. And over time, emotional pain accumulates in our soul. We carry our history in our body and live our past in our present. And all too often, our unhealed emotional pain sabotages our spiritual formation into people of love. When pain and suffering come knocking on our door, what do we do? We left off last week with the practices of Jesus, ancient spiritual disciplines by which we open our life to God. Now, I love the practices, but let's shoot straight for a minute. Maybe your experience with the practices over the last few weeks was pure bliss. You felt close to Jesus and drawn into the Trinity's inner life of love. But maybe not. When I first started on this inner journey, there were times in prayer where I would experience something that was, for me at least, counterintuitive, but I realized later, very common. I went into it expecting to feel happy and peaceful, but instead I would often feel all sorts of emotional pain. I would find myself feeling anger at someone who hurt me in my past, or feeling anxiety over my future. I would find myself suffering from what psychologists call afflictive thoughts. If that was your experience, you are not alone. Often what happens in the practices is when we slow down and come to quiet before God, all our undigested emotional pain that we've pushed down in the busyness of life, it comes up from the shadow to the surface of our heart. The Cistercian monk Thomas Keating said that the first thing that comes up in quiet prayer is what he called the unloading of the unconscious. He writes, when we commit ourselves to the spiritual journey, the first thing the Spirit does is to start removing the emotional junk of a lifetime that is inside of us. When this happens, it does not mean that you're bad at the practices. This is all part of the process of spiritual formation. The practices are not a religious formula to habit stack our way to Christ-like character. Rather, the practices create time and space for the unprocessed emotional pain of a lifetime, from our childhood wounds from 20 years ago to a passing slight from a coworker the day before, to come out of the shadows and into the light where they can be healed. In the therapy world, they call emotional pain a trailhead. Pain is an invitation from your soul to explore a path in your story, to follow it down to its origin point in search of healing. Think about the role of pain in the body. When you get hurt, pain is kind of your body's way of getting you to key in on a part of you in need of attention, healing, and love. The pain is a signal to your mind something is wrong in your body and in need of healing. Emotional pain is very similar. It's often a signal from our soul that some aspect of our person is in need of attention, healing, and love. The problem is, the modern world does not know how to deal with pain. There are three common cultural responses to emotional pain. The first is to deny. You just deny that you have pain. This is the most popular response in a lot of Christian circles because it's so easy for us to spiritualize our denial as faith in God. The psychologist John Welwood called this spiritual bypassing, which he defined as a tendency to use spiritual ideas and practices to sidestep or avoid facing unresolved emotional issues, psychological wounds, and unfinished developmental tasks. It is a futile attempt to co-opt the Christian theology of hope to skip over our pain and chase the Western life script up and to the right. The thing about denial is, it works incredibly well. It is the most effective of all coping strategies. The problem is, it's a short-term strategy and it's incredibly dangerous. Think of physical pain. If you get hurt and it's not dangerous, your body will likely self-heal. Just give it a few days or weeks. But if you have a pain in your body that won't go away, it's highly likely that something is seriously wrong. And if you deny it or ignore it or pretend it's not real, it could grow and damage you or even kill you long term. Sigmund Freud was wrong about almost everything, but he was right that whatever we refuse to face in our inner lives has the most power over us. Denying any part of our inner life, especially those parts that are in need of a healing touch, always has destructive consequences on us and on others. The second option is you detach. You emotionally disconnect from your feelings. Certain personality types seem to have the ability to cut off their emotional pain. But if we cut off our emotional pain, we inadvertently cut ourselves off to the whole spectrum of emotion, lows and highs. We don't feel sadness, but neither do we feel joy or wonder or gratitude. Of course, the most popular way people deal with their pain is to drug it. Many people literally drug their pain with alcohol or cannabis or pain meds, but most of us drug our pain more figuratively with our cultural narcotic of choice. It could be work or our career, or sex, or romance, or social media, or entertainment, TV and film and video games. It could be anything that is used as a distraction from our pain and our God, rather than a pathway through our pain to God. When we turn to drugs, either literally or figuratively, we feel a momentary relief from our pain, but ultimately we make our anxiety or sadness worse, not better. But none of these ways of dealing with emotional pain are the Jesus way. The Jesus way is to meet God in our pain. What does the Jesus way look like? Let's read from Matthew 26, which is arguably the most painful moment in Jesus' life. It's the night before the cross, when he's feeling the weight of what's coming: Judas' betrayal, his best friend's denial, his disciples' abandonment, his coming rejection, humiliation, torture, and brutal death. What does he do? Does he deny it? It's okay, God has a plan, other people have it way worse. No. Does he detach? It is what it is. No. Does he drug? Hey guys, let's go out for one last night on the town. No. He goes to a quiet place with his closest friends that he can share anything with. And then we read this. Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to them, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took Peter and the two sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." Going a little farther, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will." Notice the line, he began to be sorrowful. Jesus intentionally makes space for all of his feelings of sadness to come up, and he meets God in his pain by offering his feelings up to God in prayer. This practice, what has come to be called lament, is a key feature of what the pastor Pete Scazzero calls emotionally healthy spirituality. Scazzero's thesis is that it is impossible to be spiritually mature while remaining emotionally immature. But emotional health doesn't mean you're happy all the time. Jesus was the most emotionally healthy person to ever live. And in Luke's version of the story we just read, Jesus begins to sweat blood, a medical condition called hematohidrosis, which is brought on by extreme duress. Emotional health means, one, you're aware of your feelings. You have the capacity to notice and name your inner life in a spirit of welcome and gentleness. And two, you're not run by your feelings. You have the capacity to sit with your feelings and let your body process them before God in prayer without them causing you to behave in unloving ways. Psychologists call this emotional regulation, and the New Testament calls it self-control. But to become emotionally healthy means we have to go on the inner journey, as some call it, to meet God in our pain. We have to learn how to pray our pain to God and share our pain with each other. This is why so many find therapy to be a key part of the inner journey. Processing our pain with an older, wiser, loving soul can be deeply healing. But through practices like silence and solitude and prayer and therapy and friendship, we make time and space to process our pain and suffering with God and our community. This is often a slow, painful process, but it is the crucible of our formation. Pain and suffering are inevitable in life. Again, Jesus said, "In this world you will face trouble," not may, but will. There is no version of your life where you do not feel emotional pain. The Jesus we follow was himself betrayed, abandoned, falsely accused, unjustly treated, and murdered. The prophet Isaiah called him a man of suffering and familiar with pain. The writer of Hebrews said, "We do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are." And while few of us have ever experienced the level of trauma that Jesus did, we have all been hurt, wounded, and thrown into trials and tribulations. Left unhealed, the unresolved emotional pain of a lifetime will sabotage our spiritual formation into people of love. If we allow hurt and anger and bitterness and fear to fester in our soul, it will undermine our best intentions to become like Jesus. Hurt people, as the saying goes. Psychologists give us categories like trauma, attachment, emotional triggers, and more to name the unhealthy patterns that arise from pain and suffering, and in turn ruin relationships and block our transformation. But there is good news. Jesus went on to say, "Be of good cheer, I have overcome the world." Because of Jesus' incarnation, crucifixion, resurrection, and ascension, no pain and suffering is meaningless as it is in a secular worldview, because death and all his friends have been overcome by Jesus, which means the very pain and suffering that can sabotage our spiritual formation can become the secret to our spiritual formation. Our breakdowns can become our breakthroughs. The risen Christ has the power to take any evil, no matter how heinous, and use it for good. Nothing is wasted. As Paul writes in Romans, we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him. James says it this way, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." Peter adds this, "For a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed." Do you see it? the very pain that we all want to deny or detach from or drug, is the pathway to our transformation. If we, like Jesus, will only meet God in our pain.
I currently live in Atlanta, originally from Philly. Spent some time in Portland. And I have the honor of working at an organization called Bible Project, where I get to be a professional nerd or an associate research scholar in the traditional type of title. And just trying to help people understand the Bible as a unified story that leads to Jesus. Death is a pretty frequent visitor in my life, but I can't count on two hands how many people that I personally know that are no longer here. And I'm like, okay, God, you gotta show up for me. I found myself really praying, like praying. And in Black culture, when you mean something, you say it twice. you're like, yo, I'm not joking. Like, I'm just joking. You know what I'm saying? But I found myself praying. And what I mean by that, like, I'm literally laying before God, head to the floor, or I'm sitting in my car crying. That's typically where I pray, just sit in my car. And I found myself going like, yo, you gotta do something about this. I'm still on a journey to understand what that means. But if I watched your son through these retellings in this thing that we call the Bible, if I've seen him navigate pain and suffering, how do I pattern that way? Oh, he always talked to you. Okay, so that means I should probably talk to you if he's my rabbi. And so I go, Father, you gotta do something. Like, I know in theory, again, that there's coming a day when all pain, suffering will be eliminated, where tears will be wiped away, where there's no stone unturned when it comes to God's redemption of all things. But until that day, I'm in the here and now. Like, I live outside of the garden. I gotta go to God. And if I don't, I feel lost. Feel very lost. No amount of conversations that I have with family or friends or associates or whatever category of people, there's nothing like when I actually take time to stand with God face to face through prayer. And I'm like, yo, this is how I'm feeling. This sucks. Yeah, I'm a preacher. I don't want to fluff them up and give, you know how I feel like Psalm 13, I think it's Psalm 13, when David writes how he's like, yo, this is how I really feel up front. And then he gets into a petition, and then he gets to praise at the end. So much of my theology of suffering and so much of my prayer life has been, let me fluff God up first. Let me give the praise first, like a scapegoat, to really then get to what I want to say and to get to where my honest emotions are. And I've learned through just my experiences and just my under 30 years of life, I gotta go to God.
Touching on our emotional pain can bring up quite a lot. You may be feeling things right now that you've pushed down for many years or are painful to hold. So we want to give you a chance to share openly and let others hold your pain with you. You may not be ready for that, and that's okay. Just be as open and as transparent as you can. Here are a few questions to guide your conversation. First, can you tell one story of a painful experience you've been through that has been used for good in your formation? Second, how have you experienced God in your times of pain and suffering? Third, which of the 3 responses to emotional pain are you most inclined towards? Deny, detach, or drug? And what does that look like in your life? And fourth, what could it look like for you to reorient yourself to the pain in your life as an opportunity to be formed by God? Now let's have a conversation. This coming week, we're reading part 5 of the Practice in the Way book. In your companion guide, you find extra resources to go further, but go ahead and open to session 5 as we prepare for this week's spiritual exercise.
When I've entered into a time of silence with God, there have been times when I have experienced a sense of God's peace, love, and joy. But there have also been times in the silence, like John Mark's experience, when anxiety has risen up in my heart, or a feeling of anger, resentment, or envy towards someone. I name these emotions and then lift them up to God in prayer. The journey into emotional health involves learning to notice and name our emotions in the presence of God. When we notice and name our feelings, they have less power over us. If you were to name a painful emotion like fear, anger, disappointment, or jealousy, a brain scan would show that your very act of naming it quiets that emotion. This is why psychiatrist Dan Siegel encourages us to name it to tame it. This week, for our practice, we are inviting you during your rhythm of daily prayer to set aside time on a particular day for a specific prayer exercise that we have prepared in your guide called Noticing and Naming Your Emotions. The purpose of this prayer is to bring our emotions to God and to experience His love and presence. Begin by finding a quiet place that's distraction-free, without devices, to pray. Take a few deep breaths, relax, and center. There are 4 steps to this prayer exercise. First, notice your emotions. Let your emotions rise up within you. Second, name the emotions. Be as specific as possible. Third, feel the emotions. Don't fight the emotions, fret over it, or run from it. When we fight an emotion, it gets bigger, not smaller. Let the emotion rise like a wave, peak, and then pass you by. After 90 seconds, an unimpeded emotion will typically transform on its own. Fourth and finally, offer your feelings to God. Express your emotion to God and entrust your life to Him. You may want to set aside space to name an emotion you are carrying once this week or a few times. As you do this, some of you might have a profound experience, but others may wonder, am I doing it right? Like most practices, the deepest impact happens over time as the practice becomes part of our life. So don't feel any pressure this week. Give it a try, reflect on it, and then process it with your group in the next session. You can engage this powerful exercise for the rest of your life as you walk with God and seek to open your inner world to Him. May God give you courage and peace as you notice and name your emotions this week.
In this episode, we covered these key points. The practices are not a religious formula to habit stack our way into spiritual formation. When we slow down and come to quiet before God, often the first thing that comes up is emotional pain, as our soul begins to process and discharge all the pain and suffering of our life. There are 3 primary ways people deal with pain: deny, detach, or drug. But the Jesus way is to meet God in our pain. Left unhealed, emotional pain can sabotage our transformation. But if we open it to God, it can become the secret to our transformation.
In closing, some of you are in pain right now. The essential question in difficult times is, how do we let our pain and suffering become a portal to God and His transformation? How do we let it form us and not deform us? The answer is, we accept Jesus' invitations. There's a metaphor I find helpful from the Christian psychologist Larry Crabb. Imagine your emotional life like an iceberg. Above the surface is what Dr. Crabb calls the managed life, where our focus is on living by a set of principles to be successful. Our driving question is, how do I look and feel good? But inevitably, we get hurt, betrayed, rejected, let down, and we slip down into what he calls the wounded life, where our driving question is, what can I do to get back to looking and feeling good? Most of our life is here below the surface. And the invitation of Jesus is not to go up and out of our pain, but down and into it, to meet God in our pain, in what Dr. Crabb calls the formed life, where our question becomes, what is God doing through this and in me? That is the question of an apprentice of Jesus. This means we do not need to fear suffering. As Jesus said, do not let your heart be troubled. You don't need to be afraid. You don't need to seek suffering out. It will come and find you. But when it does, if we meet God in it, he can turn all of it for good if we only surrender to him day by day. And we can say with Julian of Norwich, all will be well, all will be well, and all manner of thing will be well.